Hello, team. Welcome back to the Live, Perform, Compete podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with James Newbury. We're not in the same room, other side in the world. Of course, this podcast will be recorded, so you can see James lounging in his hotel room where he is going to be put for the next couple of weeks, as he says, a bit of a quarantine period. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
James, we're going to start just by you giving us a bit of an update as to what's going on with you right now. I know you've been traveling the world a little bit. Of course, just said you're in a quarantine. So what's going on with James Newbury right now?
So basically, I just landed in Adelaide yesterday. I've been overseas in Europe for the last 2 months since the end of November, doing some other types of sport. I've been doing some bobsled, and basically, just arrived back home to prepare for the upcoming CrossFit season. So I'm a little bit delayed in starting preparation for that, but I've done that before, been a little bit late in starting my preparation, but I'm just going to be doing my quarantine, trying to get fit, and just hanging out. I'm envious of the weather outside. It's like 38 degrees in Adelaide and it's like amazing, and I'm stuck in a hotel room, but I am actually having quite a good time, so I can't complain.
Talk us through what's your daily routine looking like at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm getting up, I'm doing some breath work first thing in the morning, and then I'm doing my 7 minutes of burpees, which I pledge to do every morning since getting into quarantine. So I've got a bunch of people who are jumping on board and doing burpees with me, which is great. Then I'm having a little bit of breakfast, doing a training session. And then when I finish the training session, I'm just getting stuck into some work for the next couple of hours. I've got a few things on the go, just with Tiny Timer and the gym, and then like Ultra and stuff like that. So my hands are full there. So I'll usually get onto a bunch of emails and make some phone calls and things like that. Then around midday, I'll do a second session. My sessions aren't going for very long. I'm kind of just doing like 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at midday, and 30 minutes in the evening sometime. And then I'll have some lunch, get to the evening, like the afternoon, mid-afternoon, do another little workout. I'm kind of getting back into volume. I haven't done any CrossFit volume for like probably 7 months, to be honest. So I'm very unfit. So I'm just like regaining the stimulus of doing like high rep squats, regaining the stimulus of doing lots of push-ups, handstands, things like that. So I'm just trying to adapt my body to that. So not doing the sessions like with a crazy intensity or anything like that, but I'm just kind of easing back into it. So I'm just doing little spurts here and there and just trying to get some volume. Like I did 50 squats the other day with like 25 kilo dumbbells and my legs were cramping. Like that's how bad it is. So, and then basically of an evening, I'm having a stretch, doing some run wad. And then while I was overseas, I couldn't watch The Mandalorian because in Europe it wasn't released yet. So I'm watching an episode of The Mandalorian of an evening. So that's my plan for the day, and that's pretty much all I'm doing. And I'm just trying to have as good a food as possible. So while I was away, it was a little bit difficult to get my hands on the food I actually wanted. But now being home, it's much easier to get what I want when I want it. So and I'm just eating good food and having a good time being back on home soil. I don't know what it is, but once you land back wherever you live, it's just a different feeling. It's just like you just feel comfortable being on home soil, and I'm just enjoying being home.
You gave me a little tour of your hotel room. I mean, it was a 5-second tour because it's literally a hotel room. Yep. Now, what have you got available to you? You can see a concept rower there. You've got a couple of dumbbells. What else you got?
Well, I actually wrote a list to my partner, Kayla. I said, can you get one of the boys from the gym to drop this gear off to the hotel room? And the list was like this long. And she was like, you can't have that much stuff. Actually, no, the fella, my mate, said, you can't have that much stuff. And Kayla was like, no, take him all of it. And then they went to put it in the ute and it didn't fit all in the ute. So I've got a Concept 2 roller. I have 20 kilo, 25 kilo, and 30 kilo dumbbells. I have parallettes, and I have a drag rope and a ROMWOD stretching mat at the moment. And I'll see if I can squeeze in an assault bike as well. So that's the other thing I was going to get. But on my list, I had like 24-inch box. I had Olympic barbell, 100 kilos of plates. Yeah, I had heaps of stuff, but I could fit it in here, but I don't know how the reception downstairs would enjoy bringing all that stuff up. But yeah, I can make do with this stuff. It's great.
Awesome. Well, James, for today's episode, we've got a bit of an agenda lined up for you today. We're going to start with your CrossFit story, because despite a lot of other things that is associated with yourself, probably the biggest thing is your prowess in the sport of CrossFit, notably finishing 5th at the 2019 CrossFit Games. And just personally, I'd love to know your story. I don't really know any backstory as to what got you into the sport, your sporting background. You're obviously someone who is fairly versatile with physical performance, having moved into things like Ironman, triathlons, most recently bobsleigh, which we're definitely going to talk about today. But perhaps we could just rewind a little bit and talk about kind of your story with CrossFit and kind of how you got to being the athlete that you are today.
Yeah, totally. So growing up, I always loved sport. I think I probably fell in love with competing the second weekend of starting Little Athletics when I was about probably 8 years old. I had no idea at the time that what sport was or what it could be. I played soccer for a couple of years prior to that and didn't really enjoy it. I kind of just did it because my mum and dad were just like, yeah, play soccer with your brother and you can go. And, I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. But then when I went to athletics, the first weekend, I didn't enjoy it at all. I came last in all my races, came last in all of the events. And basically the way that it was structured is you would do one weekend of, these 7 events. And then the next week you do like 1 week of these 7 events or 5 events or something. And so, yeah, I came like last in everything, didn't enjoy it. And then my dad was like, no, it's all right. Like, it's okay. Go back out, do another one. So I went back out the following weekend. And then I had a guy who was the father of a girl that I just met. We had just moved to Adelaide from Sydney. And this girl, who's now actually like a really high ranked Australian sprint cyclist, her dad came up to me and said, hey, I saw you run last week, and a couple of tips for you. Like when you do your 70-meter sprint, just make sure you keep your eyes down the end of the track, stop looking around, make sure you stay up nice and tall. And after doing that, I won my race. And I was just like, what just happened? And I was like stoked. And my dad was like really happy for me. And I was just like, oh, I like this winning feeling. And I was like instantly hooked. I just wanted to win everything. I went from like coming last in everything to like flipping on a dime and winning everything. So that was like kind of what intrigued me, and the feeling of winning just kind of snowballed, and I just really enjoyed it. And then I just loved getting outside and competing in whatever I could. It wasn't just the running that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the shot put. I enjoyed the long jump. I enjoyed the high jump. I enjoyed the long distance, the short distance, the discus, javelin, hurdles. So I was like really drawn not to just the one aspect of, athletics. It was more just kind of trying to be good at everything, which obviously translates into CrossFit quite well. So that's probably where it started. And then through like my early teens and from there on, like I surfed a lot. I did lots of touch football. I got involved in rugby league. Once I transitioned out of athletics into rugby league, I played on the wing. I was a good try scorer just because I was fast for my age. Eventually everybody caught up to me in speed, but early on I was fairly fast for my age. So, scoring points at that type of grade where you can kind of just run around everybody and then score a try is rather handy. So I got really addicted to playing footy and ended up playing in some state teams, and then made a couple of national teams for the affiliated states, which was like the B tier like rugby league here in Australia. So under 15s and under 18s. Loved it. All I wanted to do was play NRL at the time for like 10 years. I was just like, I'm going to play NRL. And then I had moved to Sydney to play football over there for a feeder club for Parramatta. And a friend of mine from Adelaide, who actually owned a CrossFit gym at the time, he said, hey mate, you should go check out a CrossFit gym. Like, you've got plenty of really good CrossFit gyms in Sydney. Go check them out. And I was at the time, like, I just moved to Sydney. I was super fresh. I didn't know anyone. And I was just like, yeah, cool. So I messaged a couple of boxes and I said, hey, I've just moved here to play football. Can I like clean the toilets? Can I like clean the gym just for a free membership? Because I'm not earning any money. And luckily enough, the guy who messaged back was Mick Shaw, who owns CrossFit FX, and ended up managing and running the regionals, the Pacific regionals, Australian regionals. And yeah, he said, yeah, come on down. We don't have any jobs at the moment, but come on down. I'd like to meet you anyway. And that was my first introduction to CrossFit. And so basically I started CrossFit at the same time as I started preseason for football. That would have been like 2011. And I did my first Open a couple of weeks later. I didn't realize it was a competition sport. I just thought it was a gym you go to train to get better for whatever you wanted to do outside the gym. Like, I didn't realize you could actually compete in this fitness thing. But someone said, yeah, you can get ranked and stuff. And I was like, ranking? Like, what do you mean? Like, get ranked? And they're just like, you do a workout and then you get ranked against everybody else, like in the state and then in the region and then in the world. And I was just like, and that's when it's like, it's literally just hit me, and the competition vibe just got to me. And I was just like, you can get ranked. How do you get to number one? and that was pretty much it. And then I was like hooked on it. So I played it alongside, so I did CrossFit alongside football that whole season. Had a really good season of football. But then towards the end, I was just like, all I wanted to do was just go to the CrossFit gym and just train. I just wanted to get better at toes to bar. I want to get better at muscle ups. I wanted to get better at handstands. And all I could think about was just doing CrossFit. So towards the end of that season, I woke up one day and I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to play football anymore. I'm going to go get a job working in the mine somewhere. I'm going to earn a little bit of money for the next 6 months, and then I'm going to open my own CrossFit gym. So I moved back to Adelaide at the end of 2011. I got a job, working on an oil and gas rig, and hated it with a passion. And yeah, I went out there and did that for maybe 7 or 8 months or something like that. As soon as I had enough money to open like a little box, I left. I actually left halfway through a hitch. I was like, nah, I'm done. Can't be out here anymore. And I basically opened a CrossFit gym, did the Open in 2012. That was my first year to regionals. And basically from there, just got more and more addicted to it. I really wanted to teach it. I wanted to show people how much fun it was. I wanted to show people how cool the community is. And then I just wanted to compete with the best. I just was like very eager to see how far I could push myself. I've always enjoyed that in every sport that I've done. And then, yeah, kind of progressed. And then, eventually got to the point where I had to weigh up how much energy I was putting into the gym and how much energy I could put towards training to try and make it to the CrossFit Games. I went 4 years with kind of just missing out, making like around the top 10, but not nudging a position. Except for 2014, I was very close. I was like a couple of points away. And then that's what like really lit a fire in me. And I was just like, oh, I could actually probably do this if, I stopped taking 30 classes a week. And so then kind of progressed on from there. Eventually made the games in 2016, went to the games 2016, 17, 18, with not with placings that I was like super stoked with, but placings nonetheless. And then progressed from there through to 2019. I started training with Michelle Latondra and Pat Vellner and Laura Horvath, and went and did a training camp there prior to the games. Felt really fit leading into the games, and I kind of had been maybe a little bit hesitant in years previous to risk it a little bit more. And after being at the games already 3 times, I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to just risk it. I'm going to go all out. I'm going to, be a little bit reckless and, see how we go. And it kind of paid off. I was just like, you know what, go a little bit hotter than you'd normally like. You prepared well, so you can be rest assured that your training is going to back you up when you need it. It kind of just panned out, and, events that I typically wouldn't do really well in ended up doing quite well, especially early on, which helps to get through to the next stage. And I had a fantastic year, and all I wanted to do at the 2019 games was I just wanted to go there and have more good experiences and bad experiences, because every year prior to that, if I had walked away from the games and said, how many, in terms of percentage, how much of that did I enjoy and how much of that did I not enjoy? And the majority of it, I didn't enjoy that much, just because being a competitor, you want to win, and you put so much effort in all year long to go to this competition. And if you don't execute the way you want to, it obviously doesn't feel so great. So I kind of walked away from those 3 years previously, just being like, oh, well, 80% of that, I didn't really have a fantastic time. 20% of it, I had a good time. And then maybe a very small amount of that, I had a great time. But typically only in events that I did well in. So with 2019, I walked away from 2019. I was like 98% of this whole week, I've just thoroughly enjoyed. There wasn't much that I was just like, oh man, that sucks. Whereas years previous, majority of it was like, oh man, that sucks. So yeah, I just had a really good time and kind of was a little bit more reckless with certain things, and it kind of paid off. Like, I think you got to risk it to kind of do well at the games, unless you're completely bulletproof in everything.
I mean, the one event I keep thinking about is you doing that assault bike toe. Was it the assault bike toes to ring event?
Yeah.
Where you just,
the ringer. Yep.
I think, you just caught everyone by surprise and went absolutely all out, and just, it looked like you were just taking a gamble, and it paid off really well. Okay, I've got a couple of questions there, James. We're going to rewind a little bit to 2014, the year where you got really close but didn't quite make it. What was a game changer that year to then, really make a difference in terms of where you were finishing in the regional level, and then obviously making it to the games? Then what changed?
Yes. Yeah. So after 2012, I was just doing my own programming. I kind of just was working out in my front yard at the beach at a local Anytime Fitness. And I did the same thing in 2013 and didn't get any gains in places at the regionals. I actually came 11th, 2 places worse. I was definitely fitter, but I came a little bit worse. And I was like, oh, I need to change something up. And then I spoke to a guy, OG CrossFitter from Australia, Chris, and he was just like, oh man, you should get a coach. Chris Hogan was getting programmed by Rob, Raw Strength and Conditioning. And he was just like, yeah, man. I said, I'd like to get some programming. And he's like, yeah, for sure. So I started doing some programming, and I was blown away by the volume. I was just like, wow, like this is so much more than I was doing before. And I'd walk into the gym and there'd be workouts that I just wasn't even close to finishing. Like, I'd have to scale down the weights, and I'd have to scale down everything for the initial first month. And I was just like, holy. So it was a big change. I got a coach. I got some structured programming. I'd worked a lot more than previously. And then that was the separator. I was much better prepared physically for the game, for the regionals in 2014. I probably doubled or tripled my workload, to be honest, leading into that 2014 regionals. And there was just, a few little mistakes during that regionals, and, everyone has mistakes. So if I didn't make those mistakes, probably would have gone in 2014. So who knows? But that was the big game changer. Was my volume increased a lot. And I was working on things that I previously hadn't worked on before.
And did you find that, the massive increase in volume, you were able to adapt to it pretty well? You didn't have any negative consequences with it?
No, I adapted quite well to that. It was definitely a shock in the beginning, but didn't result in any injuries or anything like that. Typically, most of my injuries that I typically get are from me falling over. Honestly, if I look at every injury that I've had, it's either me falling off a bike or me falling over doing something stupid.
Okay, well, my next question is now talking about 2019. So you've had a change of coach now, work with Michelle Latondra. He's been in the sport for a really long time, has, a good group of athletes beneath her. You were obviously, yes, you're working with Michelle, but you were still based in Oz, and most of Michelle's athletes and Michelle were based, across the other side of the world. So what was the biggest change in 2019 that because it wasn't just a small jump, it was then getting to CrossFit Games and finishing 5th, which is, epic. So what was a massive change in 2019?
I think Michelle just really understood what I needed. I think she was very good at understanding her athletes. She took everything to heart, everything that you talked about. She would make you work really hard, but she was also very empathetic, being an ex-Games athlete for so many years. She understood what kind of works well with athletes in their mind. And she was also super supportive during the games as well, talking about game plans and giving us advice on what she thought was good. And the good thing as well, having Pat there too, because typically for me, if like Michelle was to say something, I'll be like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do that. Whereas the good thing about Pat will, ask the question or be like, no, I think this is the way we should do it. Whereas I kind of just go with the flow, and it's like, yeah, like if you say that's good, then yeah, I'll give that a shot. So having Pat there as well to like with Michelle, it's almost like I was kind of being, I guess, coached by the both of them. Even though Michelle was the coach, Pat would ask the questions or the harder questions, or if he disagreed with something, he would say so, which is great. And I know Michelle likes that, and I know she wanted more of that from me, but it's not my personality, I guess, which is maybe a downfall for me. But yeah, I think that was probably the biggest thing, is that she was empathetic when needed to be. She was hard when she needed to be, and she was just there to support all the time. It was actually her idea to go that hard in that first event of the ringer. She just got on the phone to me, and we had done some assault bike work similar to this prior to the games. We had done a really tough session at a local gym in Montreal during the training camp. And the assault bike is something that I quite enjoy, especially that hard grind or that lactic, especially when I'm fit for it. When I'm not fit for it, it's horrific. But when I'm fit for it, it's typically quite good. And yeah, she actually got on the phone to me. She was upstairs and she said, cool workout. This is really good for you. You love toes to bar and toes through rings, and assault bike is a good event for you. Just go all out and don't hold anything back, and don't worry about event number 2, because we had that backup event straight after. And I was like, okay, it's exactly what I wanted to hear. So yeah, I kind of sold out on that one and had a 0 battery left for the second event. And I was so surprised how well Matt Fraser backed up that second event, because I was trash, and he only finished like 2 seconds or 3 seconds behind me. And then he backed up to win that next event, and I backed up to come last. So
I mean, it was actually quite funny, to be honest, watching you do it, because it was really clear and I love the strategy part of CrossFit. And it was really clear that your intention was that the second part of the workout was just not even factored into the equation at all. And seeing you, seeing all the, for those who are listening, it was basically, what was the rep scheme of the assault bike toaster ring?
So it was 30, 20, 10
right.
assault bike calories and toaster rings.
Rest.
And then it was, rest up until the 5-minute mark, I believe, or something close to that, 6-minute mark, maybe.
Yeah. And then it was overhead squats and burpees.
Yeah.
And I remember just, reading your facial expressions, because I was at the games with my athletes that year, and reading your facial expressions at that waiting point was hilarious. But yeah, good effort, mate.
I was trying to hold it together, and I was like, act cool, act relaxed. And then it got to the line, and it was like countdown, and then 3, 2, 1. And I jogged literally the first 2 steps, and then I walked. I was just like, I'm screwed. Like, I was doing my burpees, and I was resting on the ground during the middle of a burpee for like 5 seconds. I was looking at my judge, and he was like laughing at me. I was like, I've got nothing left. Like, my legs and my arms, they're just like toasted. I've just drained my entire battery. But in saying that, it was probably a good strategy, because the initial one for me is like, either I kind of went, medium pace, maybe placed 4th or 5th in that first workout. Typically that second workout wouldn't have been great for me anyway. I may have placed, 7th or 6th or something like that in that event if I had, if I was fresh. So getting a first place, and I think I may have came 8th in that next event, 8th or 9th or something along those lines. So I kind of get that medium ballpark, that 4th and 4th, roughly there. But the point spread at that point in time was much better to get the 100 points rather than get, 2 lots of 4th places, or, a couple of 5ths or a couple of 6ths or something like that. So it was good. Plus you also get a little bit of cash if you win an event. So, which is really cool. It's never happened for me.
And hey, everyone's talking about James Newbury sending his soul on that workout, and it will be forever.
Yeah, exactly. I still get the messages today. It's just like every gym I go to, they're just like, oh, can you do 30 calories on the assault bike? I'm just like, oh, yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Okay, James, I'm going to sidetrack from your story a second. We're going to pick this back up, talking about the 2020 season. But you talked about the reflection process. So you talked about, finishing the CrossFit Games and, normally finishing the games with more bad experiences than good. So, clearly there's a reflection process as something that you're doing either throughout the games or when the games concludes. I'd love to hear about that thought process, whether it's a journaling process. And I think just something to add on top of that, something you've always talked about, and I remember you posted about this a long time ago, was the concept of working out versus working in. And I think you were one of the first CrossFitters at that level to start bringing attention to things like breath work, meditation, mindfulness. So I would love to, if it combines together now, would love to hear about the reflection process. And then, this concept of working in versus working out.
Totally. Yeah. So reflecting on different events, like I think I struggled, even though I thought I was doing a good job in 2016, 17 and 18, I thought I was good at reflecting on a workout, even if it was a bad one, and being like, okay, cool. Like that wasn't great, but let's move on. I think as you mature as an athlete, you get better at it. But yeah, basically I was trying to, take 5 to 10 minutes just to be like, okay, things didn't go to plan. Let's gear up for the next one. And it may have not gone down that way in those years, but the good thing I think about in 2019, as opposed to those years, I was doing that job of reflecting on an event much better than I was doing it in those other years. Even though more of my events in 2019 were better, I kind of tried to stay neutral regardless. Like if I had a good event, I would kind of stay fairly neutral and slightly above to keep me happy, because I always compete better when I'm happy. Whereas in the other years, I would, reflect on an event, say, yeah, it was not a great event and I could have done better. And then I think I would let it go, but I just couldn't. Like I would always be thinking about what I did wrong, or like I've lost points. Like this is typically a good event for me. Why didn't I do well? And then once that starts getting into your mind, is like, why didn't I do well on an event that I typically should do well on? Then it's just like, have I prepared enough? Have I done this? Have I done that? And you start questioning yourself. Whereas it's much easier, I feel, to snowball when things are rolling in your favor. You can kind of stay on that like happy side. And then for me, especially if I'm happy and having a good time, I'll compete 10 times better than I will if I'm upset about a poor event or not feeling as prepared as what I should be. When I feel prepared and when I feel fit, and I've really done the work. Like when you get to competition, whether you've done the work or not. So getting to the games in 2019, I was like, oh hell yeah, like I've done everything I could. And the sessions were really rough. They were hard, and I could also gauge myself a little bit better because I was working out with Pat. So I kind of knew like Pat is, a medal placer at most games. So I could kind of gauge myself and be like, okay, cool. Like I could probably run with that top 10 crew if I just keep a level head and do what I've done in training. You'll always, revert back to the level of your training. So my mindset was just better. I just had a better outlook on it. I was not pressured. I'd already been to the games 3 times. So I just, in my head, I was just like, you know what? I've already been. I'm all good. Like I don't have to prove anything. I just have to go and have a good time and just do some fitness. And that's what I did. And I did have a good time. Now getting into the working in point, for me in at the end of 2014, I met a guy named Ben, and Ben like spoke to me a lot about, the importance of working in and finding balance, and you've got this bucket of stress that you can, fill to a point, but then at some point you have to empty some of that stress. And he just gave me cool strategies to help work on emptying that stress bucket. Things like breath work, things like getting in the ocean, things like doing some meditation and, earthing out somewhere and just taking some time. And whether people really believe in, the earthing effect or getting in a float tank, I just think separating yourself from your phone and emails and, almost like responsibility or the world, that can really have a profound effect on how much stress you carry with you in day-to-day life. And for me, I noticed it worked really well. I was, I had less niggles. I was more, my like arousal level to train was better. And don't get me wrong, when I'm beat down in the middle of like games preparation or regionals preparation, like I'm trashed. Like my stress cup is like overflowing. But having strategies to help manage that has been really important. So, the working in side of things is something that I really, really like, and it's something that I know is going to help me when my CrossFit career is done, to still be able to, be able to surf when I'm 80 years old and feel good. And, it's something that's important to me. And I think it's very important for people, even if they're not competing.
And I'm curious to know, amongst, the other CrossFit Games athletes, how many of the other athletes are kind of talking about similar things that they're doing? Maybe they're not referring to it as working out versus working in. Maybe they don't even think of it as meditation and mindfulness. It might just be something they do very naturally. But kind of in your opinion, kind of with your eyes looking at everyone else and what they're doing, is it something that we're seeing more and more of these days?
Yeah, definitely. I think as the sport progresses and it matures, people are going to be looking for the edge any way they possibly can. And also they're going to be looking for, less injury and, less burnout. And, I think for a high level competing athlete, people are edging on that side of burnout regularly. Like I've been there before. Like I've gotten to the point where I just didn't want to train, and I wouldn't train for like 3 months, just because, I'm just completely, over it. And there's obviously something has given there, something has tipped me over the point, whether it's just, either not a fantastic season in my opinion, or just overworked, or whatever it may be. But I think people will start to look at, treating this sport as a full-time job. And, you want to make the most of these things. And, I think with all the studies that are getting around out there and all the things that people are doing, people are always looking for that edge. And I think if people start to utilize things like float tanks to visualize certain events, and, using the sauna to help, increase blood flow and decrease inflammation, and et cetera, people will start to look at things like, meditation and breath work as a really important part of their training. But yeah, I guess for me, it's just lucky that I found it a little bit earlier. And, whether I know a lot of athletes now are doing it, but whether it works for some and not for others, then for me, it feels right for me.
Awesome. Okay. So in conclusion of the 2019 season, 2020 rolls around. What happened?
So basically, I was pretty good to go in 2020. At the end of 2019, I fell off my mountain bike in October, like halfway through the Open. I broke a few ribs. I broke a couple of spinal processes in my back and punctured a lung. And so didn't have a great time. So I couldn't finish the Open. And I had an Ironman booked in 5 weeks after I broke my back, which I really wanted to compete in. And I'd already, I convinced like a handful of people or 2 handfuls of people to come to Perth with me and do this Ironman. And so I really wanted to do that. So fell off my bike, decided I'm going to get ready for this Ironman anyway. So as soon as I got out of hospital 5 days later, I jumped back on the bike, the indoor trainer, and started training just on the bike, no lifting weights or anything. Like I didn't lift any weights from October through to December. I just basically rode my bike, did a bit of running and some swimming, did the Ironman. And then after that, I went to Bali, did a quick little reset, did a 7-day fast, then came home and then started training for the first sanctioned event that I was going to participate in, which was the Australian CrossFit Championships on the Gold Coast. So things kind of progressed fairly well. I trained for 6 weeks of CrossFit. I basically had a 6-week preparation leading into Gold Coast. Probably should have been more like 8 to 10. I think it had been 8 to 10 weeks. May have been a different story, but I ended up coming second at that event. And props to Jay Crouch, who beat me in that event. He deserved it and he took the win. So I didn't actually get a spot to the games in that first event, which kills me on the inside, but he's a really good athlete. So yeah, props to him on that. And then I'd planned to go to Egypt to the LFit sanctioned event a couple of weeks later, and that's when COVID, everything got cancelled. So it was a bit of an off type of season. I kind of just missed out by, I think it was, I don't know, a couple of points. I think it was 2 points or something like that, or 3 points at that CrossFit sanctioned event here in Oz. And then I didn't really get another opportunity to, like, I couldn't finish off the Open, so that was kind of cancelled out back in October. And then I didn't get another opportunity at another sanctioned event thereafter. So I kind of just saw 2020 as a bit of a write-off. So I just figured, oh, what am I going to do now? And then, yeah, just sitting on YouTube, saw a bobsled thing pop up, and I was like, this looks cool. And then I messaged someone. I actually looked up the 2018 Australian bobsled team that went to the Olympics, and one of the guys there, Lockie, he's at a CrossFit gym, and I just messaged him, and I was like, hey man, what's the go with this bobsled thing? And he wrote back, and he was like really forthcoming with info. Said, you'll love it, man. It's so much fun. Like, it's the biggest rush ever. And I was like, yeah, this is me all over. So I looked at what was required. I basically got put in contact with Bobsled Australia, and I said, oh, what's necessary to be on the team? And they said, oh, come do trials. So I was like, okay, cool. What are the trials, and like, what do I have to do to be half decent? And they were just like, okay, you got to do power clean, back squat, 30-meter sprint, broad jump, and things. And I was like, oh, I love all those things. Let's do it. So went and did the trials. I think they were in like October or end of September, early October. It was really difficult to get into a spot to get it done just because of COVID. But I ended up flying up to Brisbane, did the trials up there. And then, like 2 months later, I was like, next thing I knew, I was in Europe. I had a guy who was already over in Europe. He's the current pilot, Evan. And he was like, hey man, do you want to come over to Europe and help push for me during this period? Because I want to do some races, and the other boys aren't available right now. And I was like, yeah man, for sure, I'll come to Europe. And yeah, then basically just got a trip, got an exemption to travel for bobsled. Got to Europe, and yeah, just started sliding in the European Cup, and yeah, just having an absolute blast doing that. And the good thing about the training, when I first looked at what it was like, be really strong, be really fast. And I was like, cool. Like, having just that very small focus point was, for me to focus just on those things, was fairly simple, considering typically we would be focusing on endurance and focusing on speed and focusing on strength. And what skills do you need to get? Like, what you have to be on the paddleboard, you have to be on the bike, you have to be able to ride hills, you have to be able to ride criterium, you have to be able to do this and this and this. So just focusing on building strength and building speed, I was just like, oh, this is cool. And I still had hours in my day to focus on like the businesses and, give Kayla attention to, which typically when I'm doing CrossFit, I don't have a lot of extra room in my brain to juggle these things, especially if you want to be the best. So I looked at it as a cool opportunity to try something new. And plus, I love adrenaline sports. And like, there is like the ultimate adrenaline is sliding down a hill at like 130 k's an hour in this little bob on the ice that has potential just to flip upside down. I was like, yeah, that looks awesome. Let's do this. So we've just done that. And I've just come home from that, but I had an absolute blast. And yeah, I'll be definitely bobsledding next season for sure.
Okay. There's too much shit I need to rewind you on here. Number
yeah,
one,
for sure.